Hey everybody, Yehuda Sunshine here from Cyfluencer, the cybersecurity thought leadership platform. I'm excited to bring you yet another action-packed conversation with today's leading cybersecurity voices, from CISOs and career cybersecurity professionals to innovative thought leaders, dynamic young cyber warriors, and everything in between. Today, we have a really exciting panel featuring Keith Price, Steve Luczynski. We're talking about veterans' transition into civilian cybersecurity. You know, everybody's talking about how can we make cybersecurity more accessible? How can we give people more opportunities? And I know that we've talked a lot about the difficulties in entry. I want to give tangible resources, talk about some practical experiences and how people can really learn, you know, what do I need to do to be able to make this experience worthwhile? And what do I need to understand I'm getting myself into? So maybe we'll start with our guests introducing themselves. Keith, who are you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So my name is Keith Price. I've been in technology for 30 years, 20 years in the U.S. Air Force active duty, 5 years with the U.S. Army as a GS, and now the last 5-6 years across various organizations, worked with Dark Matter in the UAE, Deloitte, and now I'm working under my own private consultancy firm here in the UK. Work just north of Cambridge, and I've been with Envision Pharmaceutical Group for the last year on a contract as their head of InfoSec, helping them build their program from scratch. So thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Steve, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your experiences?
Yeah, you bet. I made some adjustments to my microphone, so I want to make sure you still hear me just fine. So I didn't realize you're going to have two Air Force guys on here. So Air Force myself, 24 years. I spent a little bit of time with the Army, joint assignment in that sense, but primarily in a flying career. I got into cybersecurity during my time in the Air Force. And then even after I retired, private sector as a chief information security officer with a government contractor. I went back into government during COVID, working on a task force there. And now I am a consultant at Accenture, and I deal with critical infrastructure, cybersecurity. So a variety of things there. But I appreciate the time and getting to be on here. Thanks for the invite.
It's our pleasure to have you. I mean, I think it's really interesting to hear from your experiences where you guys have you've been everywhere across the ladder. You've had this military career, you've established yourself, established these hard skills and soft skills, and transitioned it into something where you're not only in a leadership role, but you have the opportunity to give back and to kind of give this experience. So I always think that it's interesting to hear, you know, where in people's journey did you have this spark of inspiration where you were really brought into it? Because I think that we're given a lot of responsibilities and expectations, and it doesn't always click. So was there a point in your military career and, you know, in your education before where you were really interested in, you know, cyber or InfoSec or even technology in general? Or when did it click for you? Steve, what do you think?
That's a good one. So I think it's safe to reveal I am a nerd at heart, in the sense of, as a kid, dealing with computers and experimenting, playing video games. The things I would say were fairly basic. I took a huge divergence. I spent a majority of my career as a fighter pilot. So we did not talk about computer stuff, and we did not nerd out on things like that. We certainly didn't ever talk about cybersecurity. But I had the opportunity to get back into it. I spent some time with the Navy going to school, and I spent a year focusing on cybersecurity, looking way out into the future, thinking big thoughts for the Navy that applied across all the military. And that really sparked back in my brain, I like this stuff. It's interesting. There's a number of areas that I want to do things associated with it. So it worked out really well in that sense. And then towards the end of my career, when it was time, I knew I was going to the Pentagon. I knew there were a lot of staff jobs, and there were things that could be associated with flying in areas I came from. But when the opportunity to do cybersecurity popped up, I jumped on it. And then same thing when I retired, the normal pilot path, I'm like, yeah, I could do those things. This cyber stuff's pretty interesting, and that just kept me going. So that was the start as a kid, and then having those opportunities throughout my time in the military just to stay with us.
Keith, what about you? Where on the timeline when you went into the military, was it always something that you kind of had on the back burner? Was it something that was a driving passion? Where did it kind of all connect for you?
Yeah, so I'm like Steve. I'm a huge nerd. I joined the Air Force in '91, and I actually started out as an ammo guy. So Steve probably knows quite a lot about our career field as a fighter pilot. But early in my career, I was asked in a room of young airmen, "Is anyone in here good with computers?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I've done that." And they said, "Okay, you're going to Ramstein. We're going to teach you how to be a mainframe operator." And that's where I got into IT. Was doing CASB mainframe operations. From there, I always stayed ammo, but because the comm folks don't like going out to the bomb dump, which is all the way on the other side of the base or even outside the base in some of the deployed locations, the IT comm folks said, "Hey, Keith, we're just going to give you rights. You're going to be a network administrator. You're going to be a network engineer. We're going to give you server admin rights. You're going to be a work group administrator." And so I basically was the ammo IT guy for 20 years, and even got into some security architecture. And back in the day, it was called CompuSec. And that's really where my journey into cyber started. And it was about securing individual computers within the military LAN, for the specific base, right? Yes, we had connectivity outwards, and the internet started with DARPANET, and all these things were very intriguing to me. As where does all this begin? And the U.S. military had such a big hand in promoting it. And what are the security implications? So in the military, we are, cyber is, we got this big red no stamp. Hey, we want to do this project. No. Hey, we want to improve the usability for our users. No. And so it was very easy being cyber in the military, because that's all you had to do was tell people, this regulation says you can't do that. Sorry, I wish I could help you. But then coming into the private sector, I had to quickly learn yes, but. And yes, but is, I would love to support you in this new business functionality, but we need to think about these risks. And for me, my security cyber professional journey has gone from that place of very technical, briefing 4-star generals at AFRICOM and their eyes rolling in the back of their head. They're like, I don't understand what this guy's talking about. To sitting in front of, the CISO, global CISO at Deloitte, and I need to explain what are the business risks associated with these technological risks. And so I had to get CFOs as mentors, and I had to take an MBA course so that I understand language of business. And it's been a great 10 years being in the private sector. And there's more to come. So I would say it's a very, there's a lot of people in the military getting into cybersecurity, some very large organizations out there that are helping people transition. And like Steve, they don't come from traditional IT backgrounds, but that doesn't matter, because the skills that they bring, the leadership skills, especially in like Steve's case, are very hard to find. And they're, to bring somebody like Steve into the picture, into the security profession, and then have them learn and develop those skills as they go is really probably the best way to go about building that function and building that leadership.
Yeah. Steve, we can't hear you, even though you were recently complimented. I was going to say, I thought Keith was also a great leader, but now that my audio is working, we'll wait for Steve to kind of get this into gear so we could hear him. But I'd love to hear about some of the soft skills that you learned in the military that laid the foundation for this switch into the civilian sector, because Keith talked about a very interesting point in having to be able to address different audiences in a different voice, to be able to communicate in a different style and evolve those skill sets. So when in the military, what do you think was the most transferable soft skill? Steve, I still can't hear you, unfortunately. So I guess maybe we'll take Keith for the assist, and then Steve will jump back here.
So from a very young age, 18, 19 years old, senior airman, leading teams of 4 tactical type comms teams. We had to learn very quickly how to take care of our people, right? So leadership, it's about getting the mission done, but to do that, you look after your team, you take care of your people, you develop them, you look after their quality of life, you look after their mental well-being and so forth. Those are key factors. And I would say that's probably the number one soft skill that most military people learn very early, in their military careers. Like I said, most join at 18 on the enlisted side. By 20 years old, they're leading teams, and in deployed locations. Okay, the Air Force, we got it pretty good. I'm not going to lie that, of all the branches of military, our quality of life was always top notch, but at the same time, you have other challenges to overcome. So in Afghanistan, as an example, we couldn't lay fiber throughout all the mountains of Afghanistan. We had to use other technologies, microwave, point to point. And so learning those technologies and leading a team and implementing those, and cross-functional as well, right? So we relied on the 10th Mountain Division for many things. We relied on the Navy and our Marine Corps partners for many things. So you have to learn not just leading your own team, but also the cross-functional leadership. I think Steve alluded to it earlier in his time working with other branches. Every branch has their own little ways of doing things. And so it's very important that you learn and respect and adapt to those different military cultures. And that's a very important soft skill that is very transferable in the private sector and very much sought after.
Yeah. Judging by the cough I heard, I think Steve is back with us.
I am back on. Yeah, apologies.
Oh.
So clearly not the technical background guy. But I heard everything Keith was saying, and I can't agree more. The idea of getting really good in your particular service, okay, great. That's your company, that's your IT, whatever it is. But then the ability to take that beyond and think further out. And I think that's one of the things, it sounds like Keith having more of the hands-on technical enlisted, typical being the ones doing the work background, whereas I had the leading the teams, managing what's going on, but we still have this bigger picture. And I think that's something that comes from service, where you know your little piece of the mission, but then you know what's going on over there and you know what's going on there. And especially as you go up in the ranks, the ability to understand that bigger picture. I do this, but this is where it fits. We all have that, no matter how long we were in the service. And the ability to understand that. And then what Keith also said is the ability to talk about these things to others and relate, okay, this is what I'm doing. Here's what you're doing. I need to understand that. And then take that beyond. And when you take that into the corporate world, it's understanding your technical versus their business, and the fact that it's still our mission, the company's mission, things of that nature. So again, very much like what Keith was saying before, that getting to see that, and I've had to apply that, and it's been very helpful in doing that. Whether it was across the government or just across one company, seeing all of that happen.
In the process of learning these skills and the leadership building, who are the individuals and the experiences that really shaped your vision in, I really want to commit to this. I want to help other people being able to learn this skill set. And I'm actually really personally passionate.
Shoot, I'll jump on that one. That there isn't a single name. I've been very fortunate in the sense of throughout my military career, you have the different folks, your flight commander, your squadron commander, your group commanders that you've mentored with, and they take the time to talk to you. And so, and then even when I was getting out, so I think that's a common experience. What I think is more important is, as I was getting out, for example, when I started reaching out to military that had left that I knew, so I could talk to them going, hey, what's it like out there? What are you looking at? Not being afraid to ask for help. That's one of the things I would want to share with the audience of, yeah, I'm getting out and I want your help, whether it's your help going to your company or your help learning what's happening out there. All of those folks, they're the ones that made me go, you know what, that little bit of investment that they gave and the huge value it gave to me. Now I'm excited when I have the opportunity to do that with my friends that are getting out, others that I meet, being able to network and see that happening. And then also young folks, whether it's some through my network who I get connected to coming out of college or grad school, or others coming out of the military, when they say, well, can I get your thoughts on things? I'm like, you bet. And let's make time. And I drive that from a mentor perspective, because that's what was given to me, and being able to give that back is something I really enjoy.
Yeah, I think that it's huge to see how important that is in your path, and at the same point to understand that the only way that the process continues is you actively taking a leading role. And I think that it's also interesting to hear, the relationship of people in the military being able to share these collective experiences, get over the emotional hump and some of the fear of the unknown, and start going, in Hebrew we call it tachlis. It's like, what's the skill that I need to do to make this problem solved? I'm not interested in complaining. I'm not interested in whining about it. I want to be able to think, what do I need to do to get to point B? So Keith, were there some people in your journey as well who really shaped this? And were there some points where you said, this is something where I don't think that it's a job. I think that this is a career that's going to transcend the military itself.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to echo what Steve said. It's not any sort of one name. What I do remember though is as I was getting ready to retire from the Air Force, we have a thing. I think it used to be called TAP. And it's like Transition Assistance something program, and you sit in it for like a week, and you have all these different people come to tell you, all the exciting stuff that'll happen as you look to transition out of the military, whether it was a retiree or you did 4-6 years or whatever. And this LinkedIn existed, but nobody really used it to the effect that they do today. And so in that TAP, I met folks like Steve, pilots. I met people from other branches who had been based, co-located within the COCOM, as it were. And so that's where our network started, was that year out from transitioning, is meeting these people, staying in touch with them. And then, obviously going to the second and third degrees, if you could attend conferences and so forth. But then for a guy like me who spent almost his whole time overseas, the UK, Europe, and the Middle East, a lot of the folks that I know are actually from like the British military and the French military, a lot of our NATO partners. So for me, a guy who knew he was going to stay over here overseas, forming those relationships early on was very important as well. But it was a lot tougher, I'll say that. And today we have these amazing networks on LinkedIn and other social media networks of veterans who willingly give a lot of their time to help people transition, not just with the big picture stuff, but they do like individual sessions. They've got lives and families and all this other stuff, and they amaze me. I mean, I do what I can. I usually mentor 1 to 3 folks at a time. But I've known people that, they're doing 5-10 mentorships at a time. And I'm just in awe of how they can do it. But again, it's for us to say, okay, this is what TAP told you, or this is whatever the program told you. Here's some of the reality when you're looking to get out. These are some of the things you should do now, or, as soon as possible. Don't wait until you've actually, hung your boots up or whatever, and you're out the door of the military, because by then sometimes it might be not too late, but just a lot harder, to get your foot in the door and so forth. And that's one of the reasons why after I retired from the Air Force, I went back GS Army, because I was finding it so hard to get, into the private sector, rather, get my foot in the door, because I just didn't know anybody, other than, Lockheed Martin, Northrop, and those folks that we work with. So yeah, I would say it's, again, not any one person, but really it's the mentality, and people have told me, you military guys, you hit the ground running. Every time you do something, every time you start a new job or a new project, you hit the ground running and you go. And that's what military people do. We're here to get the mission done, take care of our people, and make sure everybody gets out alive and, get the mission done.
I'll jump in there too, Keith. You reminded me, I did have an advantage because I remember back in, I think it was late 2006, when I was told by a retired Navy captain, get on LinkedIn. I'm like, what do I care? I'm a major. I've got 10 plus years. And so the advantage was I got on there, and then just like you said, you had to do it much quicker. But I had the luxury of, okay, now I'm linking with the other few pilots in the Air Force. Then it was other military. And then it just kept growing to the point where by the time I was actually getting out and I really did care the most, I had more of a network and I had it beyond just the military. So again, an advantage nowadays with all the different networking capabilities that I definitely recommend taking advantage of.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I wanted to kind of touch on it. Keith really brought it into swing. Some of the programming that the military provides in this transition, but there's also the steps that the individual needs to take maybe a year or two before, when they start thinking, who are the people I need to reach out to see, are there civilian prospects? I can start building the relationship with the company so I can kind of avoid that perception of the barrier. What are some of the additional resources that I need to start looking into? If it's certifications, if it's, we're talking about hitting the ground running, but you have to put on shoes first, right?
Yeah. Well, so, being military, a lot of us have security clearances and stuff. And so for us, we're hot property, right? A lot of the big players in the space, in the cyberspace, they know when your DD 214 hits your mailbox. They're ready. They're ready to recruit you, and there's a lot of support in that space. And so what I found was, that we looked at, I think it was 8570 back in the day, right? So they said, if you're looking at this level, you got to, looking at Sec Plus. If you're looking at this type of job, you want these types of certifications. And I went back to college after I retired, because I knew to get into the executive space, because I'd had some mentors in the senior executive leadership space, both in the military and the private side. They said it's going to be really important for you to have those degrees. So I went and got a bachelor's degree, and then I joined the Army as a GS, did the master's degree, because people told me it's not just important to have that parchment, but it's to have the critical thinking skills that you learn while you're in university, right? So the certifications teach you one thing, very focused usually. We look at things like SANS, very good certifications, the CEH and the ISACA and all those, very good certifications. But then you kind of need to round out your capabilities. And at the time, I was told it may be right, it may be wrong, but a lot of those HR gates, you got to have the degree, right? Now, guys like me who are hiring managers, I don't put so much emphasis on that, having the degree, because I see, and a lot of people are the same. We see the whole person, right? We want to see what soft skills do you have that relate, and it might not always be technical skills too, right? So as a good example is a lot of teachers are looking to move into other careers, and so we're looking to pull teachers into cybersecurity, because one of the greatest ROIs in cyber is employee cyber awareness programs, right? Teachers are a perfect fit for running those types of programs. And so I bring you in as
sure.
You've already done the job teaching people, and now I'm just telling you, this is the new syllabus. Go out and figure out what works well for our employee base, and they love it. Solicitors are the same thing, right? You think data protection officers, lawyers make very good DPOs. It's just, in their nature, they're very, very focused, and they know all the compliance and regulations. So these are the things that we think about when we're looking at folks transitioning from the military. You may be a pilot, you may be a security forces, you may be a cook, you may be avionics. Though, what skills did you learn in that field that translate into our cyber field?
I'll jump in. The idea that you said, what do you look at a couple years out? Two things jump to mind. It goes back to the networking partially that I mentioned before. I had made up my mind knowing, okay, this is going to be my last assignment, however long that is. And that was one way to escape the Pentagon. So I admit I was very selfish in that sense. But the idea was, while I was in that assignment, I looked around and I studied what's out there. And then I would talk to people, again, whether it was currently serving, whether it was retired folks from my network, it was meeting others, it was in the private sector. But that time, and even when I was still holding out, maybe I'll go back to flying, because of course that's what I should be doing. But as I continued on that path, I was like, no, it's time for me to leave. And I really do want to do these other jobs. So taking the time, which is really strange, that click in your brain when you know you're getting close to the end, if you have that luxury, being able to study and think about and explore the different areas and the certifications. Like, again, that was a luxury I had in the job, where they were like, hey, you need Security Plus, you need to do these other certifications to help you in this policy related job. So that was something I did enjoy. And then the other thing, this is very particular. I think your audience is international, but this is very particular to the U.S. military, is the Skill Bridge program. I'd only heard about it peripherally when I was leaving, but as I see it happening now, friends at companies who host the program, other friends who have done the program, the fact that you can get permission to leave the military for about 3 to 6 months. You're getting paid by the military, but you're working at a civilian company, and you're getting to try them out. And, of course, if you do well, they're probably going to make you an offer. But that ability now, and this, I've seen it from retiring 06s down to junior enlisted, being eligible for this program, and to think about it, put it in your planning. How do you get into that? How do you position yourself for it? Is just such a tremendous opportunity. I'm jealous in a lot of respects, but I'm incredibly happy for the fact that the military has realized, yeah, let's do this. It is worth the investment. It is worth taking care of folks. They're happy. Maybe they're going to stay in. But just all of those things, those are the two big things of, if you have that time to plan that far out, that you can look at doing those things.
I'd love to pick your brain here about the difference in experience for NCOs versus officers in making this transition, and being able to both show the transferable skills and being able to plan in this transition in the same way. It seems like officers kind of, the network is different, the leadership skill building is established in a different way. How is this transition different? And how do we need to support NCOs in their transition in a way that might not be the same or might not require the same resources as retiring officers?
Keith, I'll be interested in your perspective. I don't know if there is a difference. And I say that in the sense of I would say it's more of like your 1 or 2 assignment junior enlisted person. Because when you get into those senior ranks, I've seen, you can't tell. If they did not have a uniform on, you're talking to somebody, officer, senior NCO, leadership, getting things done, mindset, approach, not readily apparent. And I think that just shows, the level of professionalism and what folks do. And, you just happen to have different backgrounds. You had different paths, but you're still in those leadership roles. Whereas, sure, with a more junior person who doesn't have all of that, and again, a different mindset of things, I do think they have a little bit more where that tends to be the more technical crowd. But I would say the same for a junior officer, somebody who's in just for a short time, who's managing a small team, who might have a little bit of hands-on experience. They also lack those skills. So getting out is probably similar. I think the perception is that it's different, but I'm not 100% sure that it is. And Keith, I don't know if you've had any experience there to see otherwise.
Yeah, I have to agree with your assessment on the senior ranks enlisted versus officer. I think the one place I've seen where it's slightly different is in the Army. So the warrant officers, they're like the bridge, right? Yeah. They're the technical subject matter experts, and they, the junior soldiers. So I was in the 52nd Signal Battalion in Stuttgart. This is where I'm giving this sort of this picture. Is the junior enlisted folks would not just pair up with senior NCOs, but they would also be quite eager to work with the various warrant officers across this, because they were network engineers, server, and they had these specializations across all IT to include security. And they would sort of shadow these folks, for like a month or two, and then they'd rotate around, and they'd come into our civilian side too. So we had GS, service desk, same thing. And the soldiers would come in for a rotation. And a lot of them ended up sort of leaving, if they weren't going to become career, they would leave and look to go into, technology field or a security field. And you could tell there was a vast difference between those folks doing 2-4 years in the service and then leaving, versus officers and NCOs who were doing 15, 20, 25 years. And I think it revolves more around those soft skills that we talk about, because the technical skills, yes, you're always evolving them. Even as an NCO, I was still learning the newest technologies. We were starting to get into cloud, as an example. So I had to learn how to properly, securely manage AWS S3, right? We always hear about S3. But the junior folks, they were getting into they almost had an advantage in ways, because they were getting into the private sector before guys like me. So when I went into the private sector, I was working with folks who were prior military, left at 4 years, but now had this 10, 15, 20-year jump on me in the private sector, and they were the boss, and that's cool. I felt good about, as being an NCO, preparing people like that to be successful in the private sector. So, and then guys like us, we kind of go in with our eyes wide open. We kind of know what the realities are. And some of the dues that you have to pay, it's fine. It's all part of life. It's not just specific to the military. There's so many similarities between private sector and military. A lot of people think they're worlds apart, and they really aren't. So yeah, I would have to agree with Steve that, the senior old dinosaurs, we kind of had similar experiences, and when I went GS, GS 13, working with GS 13s who were retired majors, lieutenant colonels, and so forth, we didn't care. We knew each other's rank when we were in, but nobody cared. We were there to do a job, and we respected each other for that.
Very interesting. It's interesting to hear this kind of misconception, and how leadership and sheer ability and skill can kind of go above the fold, and people can see that upon impact. So I think that's really cool. I'd love to hear some of the specific organizations that you found were really beneficial for your transition, and that you continue to look at, either volunteering on this end, or that you think provide really, really good resources for soldiers who are considering this switch. Steve, what do you think?
So one came to mind, and of course I can't remember the name, but it was a vets transitioning program, and it was a corporate. I think corporate was in the name.
ACP?
Yes, thank you.
That's
American Corporate Partners, I believe. So
yep.
That was great in the sense. So there's a ton of different organizations. There's ones like ACP, where you apply to it. You're telling them you're interested. It's not like you have to get. It's not. It is an open program, and what it is they will pair up a transitioning veteran or somebody who recently retired, recently left the military, retired, or just got out, with somebody on the corporate side. And what they try to do is match you at a level that matches what you're at, in the sense of, if you're an old guy getting out, they're going to put you with somebody like that who can share that perspective and experience. Now, it could, I say old guy, it's a woman, it's a man, it doesn't matter. It's somebody with a similar background and experience who can talk to you in a way of, yes, I don't know, maybe they're military, maybe they weren't previously in the military, but they can talk to you at that level, or a more junior person who can talk at that level. But the point is, it's somebody who's been on that other side, who knows the corporate landscape, who can help you understand whatever it is you want to talk about. Hey, what do you think of my resume? Well, I don't understand it because you wrote it in military. Here's how we talk on the corporate side. Here's how we do career paths, things of that nature. So or it could be industry specific. So that was I was paired up with somebody from Wells Fargo. I remember it very well. So it was very useful to be able to talk, not only helping me with my resume, helping me think what I wanted to go into, especially in cybersecurity. My gosh, there's so many things you can specialize in, which I didn't necessarily appreciate at the time. So there were things of that nature. There were things on my own that I discovered over time, just basic Coursera, edX, Cybrary, all these online resources. So as I wanted to nerd out and get into the technical side, because I actually enjoyed doing that, I could go dig in for free, or I could pay a very minimal amount They run sales around the holiday time, so that's coming up for folks that are looking at it. They do free things for vets, Splunk, Microsoft, and I think Google Cloud also does a lot of free for veterans, different 200 level courses. There's buckets of just plain YouTube videos for doing all of that. And then the other one I'm a huge advocate for, I want to throw out, is B-Sides, the B-Sides hacker conferences. So again, international, all over the world. They are so awesome. B-Sides Las Vegas, I know in particular from going many years, they have an entire recruiting track that Kathleen Smith runs. And that's all they do. They talk about all these different issues, whether it's military or just your resume and a technical review and mentors and meeting companies, events like that, local events that you can go to and you can talk to people. That's the bucket of resources that I found incredibly helpful. And I still find it helpful, whether it's in roles I've been in, going out and finding and recruiting, or just for myself of what am I thinking about next and how do I get into that industry versus where I am and specializations.
Yeah, and for me, whilst I didn't have knowledge of ACP, and I just recently got connected with VetSec, which is I think 3,000 strong member veteran security community. But now I work with ACP as a mentor. But back in the day, a lot of my information from the VFW. So they were helping me with my medical, my disability package and that kind of stuff. And I just happened to be, and they said, oh, do you have any career transition help? We've got all that. And I said, oh, okay, let's take a look at that too. And so the VFW helped me a lot. There's plenty of veteran service organizations, VSOs out there. And then I would say the other one that, when you mentioned resumes, Steve, there was a retired Air Force colonel. She had a resume writing service back then, and she specialized in taking all your EPRs, OPRs, whatever, and you send them all to her, and then she sends you back a resume fit for civilian use. And I was like, oh my God, because Steve's right. We have our USA jobs or our military resume, and it's just walls of text. And, I did all this for 20 years, and it could be 10 pages long, and people they accept it, but that doesn't fly in the civilian world. In fact, it'll count against you in many cases because they see all this jargon and acronyms and all this. They're like, I don't know what that is. And I don't want to work with this guy or gal because it's going to be a nightmare because they're just going to come in here and throw all this jargon at me. So to be able to translate and be honest, you can some of the things you do in the military world, they are applicable to civilian world. You're not lying. You're just saying what I did here. A GRC. I did policy reviews. I wrote plans and process documents. That's GRC work, right? So get somebody to help you with that, because doing it yourself from the beginning is daunting, right? Even if you have a literature degree, it's still going to be tough to translate that military to the civilian resume. So very important. And CV for my UK and European audience.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to hear how passionate you guys are about this. And I wonder if in that same vein, you could kind of dispel some of the biggest misconceptions in this transition, where people blow up these obstacles or these barriers for entry, when in actuality, there's a either simple solution or putting your head down to be able to get the traction. So what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions are?
Well, I guess I'll throw out just the fact that, how do you cross over into something brand new? I spent a vast majority of my career flying, not doing cybersecurity. But when I started looking at what I really wanted to go into, and I understood my story, this is what I'm interested in: leading things, leading teams, building a program. The fact that the third time I mentioned to the CEO who hired me, hey, I'm not your technical guy. He's like, dude, I know you've told me that. I don't need technical. I've got somebody technical. I need you to work these things, and you have that. So please stop saying that. It's appreciating what you have, but it's also appreciating it's understanding what you have and appreciating the fact that people look at that whole picture of what's going on. So you do have the ability of, yeah, I did this in the military, but here's these other things I'm interested in. Once you have that opportunity to tell that, and people interact, and I think good results coming out of that.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that I encountered, and it was definitely a positive for me, was moving into the civilian world, was the definite increase and improvement in diversity in the teams that I worked with. Right. So in the military, and you don't realize it because you sort of become numb. You're just working with your crew. So me and the other 39 folks in the room looked a lot like me, white guys. Right. And you just don't realize what is missing. It was very good teams. Don't get me wrong. It's, we got stuff done. But when I moved into my first civilian role, where I had much more diversity in people's backgrounds, cultures, races, religions, women, and different, aspects across the various spectrums. And then to include things like neurodiversity, right? So working with people in the autism spectrum, as an example, right? You just don't realize the difference that makes. But it also introduces challenges for people like me, because I didn't have the skill, I didn't have the tool set to properly adapt into their world, right? This is not my world anymore. This is these people's world. So it took a little bit, and I went to my junior folks and I said, I need your help. I need your help learning, what is important to you? What is important to your generation? And we see vast differences in generation. What's important to generation Z, millennials, Xers, and then the boomers, whatever. There's different layers, right? And it's not right or wrong. It's just a case of what did these people grow up with? What is important to them? And, one of the things that I really love working with younger generations is their empathy, but at the same time, they don't take any bullshit, right? If they're not happy with an employer, see ya. I'm going somewhere else where I don't have to deal with the anxiety. Whereas folks in my age group and probably above were like, yeah, we'll just tough it out. This sucks and my mental health really sucks, but I got to do. But I work with the younger generations and they're saying, you don't have to do that, right? It's good to work through tough times together, but it shouldn't always be tough times. That's a red flag so those are the kind of things, I would say, the misconceptions that I had when I was transitioning from the military, but I didn't know them. I didn't know they existed until I actually stepped into a more diverse workplace.
I definitely saw that. So I agree with you there. And the other one that jumped out as I was thinking about your question was the idea of, well, we do this in the military. We have these motivations. Over here in the corporate world, it's money, and that's all, just different things. And very quickly, what I saw was like, hey, that person talks like I do, or like this general that I knew. And I don't know, I think so much had been drummed into me where very quickly I'm like, wait a minute, they're thinking the exact same way. They have a mission focus. It's the client, it's the business, it's taking care, it's growing. Sure, money's behind it, but it was still the very same language and approach to things. And I enjoyed that. And I started thinking about, I was like, and I couldn't help it. Like, yeah, they're kind of acting like a colonel. That's kind of like a general. Like, that one's the passed over captain who ain't going to stay long. But it just helped me frame as I was seeing things and being able to go, yeah, I will follow and do what that person says, because they're squared away. They know what they're talking about, things of that nature. So you start seeing that, and again, that's something I appreciated dispelling from what I originally thought as I transitioned out of the military.
I think that seems like the clear level of transition when you start transcribing your previous experiences to what you're living, because it's so clear that they have that parallel. Then it doesn't become this scary thing to go into. This is your practical experience in another room, in another permutation. So With that, I maybe you could give over something. We're talking to soldiers who are considering this path. What's one bit of salient advice that you would give a soldier who's considering this transition? They have another year left in their commitment. What's the one thing that you would suggest that they consider as they move on to this next step? No pressure.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be LinkedIn. I would say that applying for jobs is for suckers, right? What you want to do is you want to get in with the hiring managers. You want to find out, where do you think you're going to enjoy working, right? Some people like, I when I was in Deloitte, it's huge, global organization, but I'll be honest, it wasn't for me. I actually prefer the smaller, 2,000 employees, kind of having a little bit more impact on the success of the organization. And I like to know everybody in the company, right? And I couldn't do that realistically in a place like Deloitte. Dark Matter was the same way. 500 people, I knew everybody, and it just those types of places that they're sort of like can do. There's less bureaucracy. If you got to do something, you go in and you knock on a door and you do it. And the same thing with getting ready to transition. Start knocking on those doors now. Get yourself some mentors, and not just in the cybersecurity space. Like me, if I would have known a year or two before leaving the Air Force, I would have looked for CFO mentors and COO mentors and people that were in, the business side of things, HR, people that could teach me, what are the the baseline standards or the industry best practices, even better, for developing a workforce, right? Because in the military, we have, this is your development plan and you do it X, Y, Z. A lot of it was a lot of what we call pencil whipping, it wasn't, and it kind of, we let people down in a way, in that way. We did develop our people because otherwise we wouldn't be as strategically and technically superior, but there are some things that we did let people down on. And so I would say reach out to those types of folks as well as the security hiring managers. And I would say also reach out to the people that aren't managers. Reach out to the people who left the service a couple of years before you did. So that way you can get the most recent feedback from people who've just left ahead of you and start making those relationships as well, friendships. And, realistically, I would say that for me, that's the number one thing that I would advise, because everything else you'll learn from those people. What certifications are hot? Which degree programs should you be looking at if you're interested in degrees? All that kind of stuff. So that's if I could say one piece of advice, it would be LinkedIn and network. Hit some B-sides, as Steve said, some conferences, walk around, shake hands.
Yeah.
And
I like that one bit of it. No, I like that one bit of advice in 7 parts.
Well, I'm going to add on to it, because everything that Keith said, and the only nuance that I'll add, that something I don't think it's just unique to me, is don't be afraid to do those things. So where Keith described, here's the people to go to and how to go about, and the need to do it. To me, we tend to be reluctant in the military sense, like, well, and hey, retired general or retired person I worked with, you're at this company that I want to go to, and man, I really want to work there. But if I just say, hey, I haven't talked to you in so many years, and now I reach out saying, oh, hey, Keith, I want to get together for a coffee because I want a job. That's okay. They know it, and they don't have a problem with that, because if you have the skills that they know they or their company are looking for, they get a recruiting bonus. They're happy to talk to their old buddy from many years ago. It's not a problem. So don't be afraid to do that. It's, you're grabbing a coffee, you're asking for their help. Do you mind looking at my resume? Of course, if you ask me to look at your resume, the next thing I'm going to do is, ooh, this is awesome. I'm going to put them at my company because I want to help them. Sure, it doesn't hurt if I get a recruiting bonus, or I know somebody at this company. And again, like Keith said, yes, LinkedIn has some really good job posting things, and I have alerts, and I looked at those, and they were very useful. But I got my job because a neighbor knew a guy who was hiring for the role that I went into. So it's absolutely that networking value and not being afraid to get out there and ask folks for that help, to ask them, what do you recommend? What do you see going on? So definitely a pile-on there.
Really, I think it's inspiring to hear this collective journey and the process and the interconnectivity of the military as well. That people are so receptive to be able to give back and understand that it's not just crossing the dots and then you go into the next lifestyle. There is some things that you need to be able to adapt to, and the way that you understand it is by learning from other people's experiences. So it's interesting to hear this. I'm glad that you guys are helping the community. I think that we're all really learning a lot from you, and the veterans who are transitioning to cyber. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I think that you guys both show what that could be if harnessed. So I'd love to tell the audience a little bit more about how we can follow you guys on social media, where we can hear about you speaking, hear about your different organizations and everything. Where can we find you guys?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm active with a lot of startups over here in the UK as a board advisor. I do it because I want to be able to help young entrepreneurs really try to succeed with their businesses. So that's something that I'm really passionate about, and it's mostly in the security space. So everything from recruiting to capture the flag type events. I attend a lot of those over here in the UK, mostly in the UK. I used to get out to mainland Europe, but since COVID hit, it's sort of put a dampener on my traveling abilities. But no, I used to get around to all the conferences. I like to speak at some of the smaller, more intimate gatherings, and so I'll announce those on LinkedIn. I'm not a big Twitter user. I don't know anything about IG. So really, for me, it's like if you want to see where I'm going to be, check LinkedIn. We do have what's called Cybeer events, so it's cybersecurity and beer, and
Ooh.
there's regional groups here in the UK. So we show up at pubs and we just shoot the shit. So
I like that idea. Maybe we should bring that to Israel.
That's genius.
yeah.
So I'm similar in the sense of reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm still on Twitter. I'm holding out hope. We'll see what happens. But
You don't work there,
actually,
so you're fine.
that's right, exactly. So either one of those, happy to connect and help out. And then the other thing, and then you can see it on my name from previous meetings I've been on. I'm also active with the Aerospace Village. So if you're interested in getting into aviation and space cybersecurity, that is something that our nonprofit does. DEF CON's our big event. We also participate in RSA if you're ever out there. And then we're trying to grow further into some of the local B-sides. So happy to have you join us there too, and if you want to talk.
Amazing. So thank you for joining us for another great conversation in cybersecurity hosted by Cyfluencer, the cybersecurity thought leadership platform. At Cyfluencer, it's our mission to make cybersecurity more accessible through sifting through the heavy brand, product, and marketing copy to help you find the most relevant ideas and interesting perspectives in the digital domain. Follow us on social media. Check us out on Cyfluencer.com and check out the next conversation. Thank you guys so much, and we're looking forward to speaking to you guys soon. Feel good.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.